They called their islands Nippon, the source of the sun. In the 4th century, Nippon was unified under an imperial dynasty. In 1543, Portuguese merchant ships arrived in Nippon. The Spanish and Dutch would soon follow, accompanied by missionaries. In 1603, Tokugawa Ieyasu overthrew the emperor. Tokugawa reduced the role of the emperor to being little more than a figurehead, powerless. Nippon, for the next 265 years, would be ruled by shoguns, feudal lords. Their fortresses and fiefs would be protected by their loyal samurai. To protect Nippon from outside influence, Tokugawa expelled all Portuguese and Spanish merchants along with their Catholic missionaries. Tokugawa feared foreign ideas would be seeds for insurrection. Nippon would be closed to all outsiders, isolated. Tokugawa issued severe penalties even for his own citizens. No one was allowed to leave or return. Severe penalties for breaking the law of the land would be imposed even on innocent fishermen rescued at sea wanting to be repatriated with their families. There were only 3 exceptions to the draconian rules of isolation. Koreans and Chinese merchants were permitted into Japanese ports. With the Spanish and Portuguese expelled, the 3rd exception would be the Dutch. The Dutch were allowed 2 trading ships per year to berth on an artificial island located in Nagasaki harbor. Dejima Island would be Nippon's only window on the west. While Europe and the United States industrialized, for the next 2.5 centuries, Nippon remained frozen in time, isolated. Nippon's trading partner, China, tried to prevent the British from selling opium to her people. The British refused to end their lucrative narcotic trade. The Opium Wars, as they were called, spanned from 1839 through 1860. The war ended in the total humiliation of China. While China was forced to capitulate, the shoguns kept Nippon's ports closed to foreigners. The tales of 3 castaways lost at sea whose lives would help bring down the shogunate and propel Japan into the modern age. Otokichi was a 14-year-old crewman on a rice ship. The ship was caught in a violent storm, damaged and left to the prevailing currents. The ship drifted for over a year, eventually coming to rest on the westernmost point of Washington's Olympic Peninsula. Only 3 crewmen survived the ordeal. The 3 surviving crewmen would be captured by local Indians and enslaved, but employees of the Hudson Bay Company would come to their aid. In the hopes of repatriating the castaways, the survivors were placed on a ship and transported first to England, then on to Macau. In Macau, missionaries hoped to use the castaways as a goodwill gesture to regain access to Japan. In July 1837, an American trader, Charles W. King, offered to help repatriate the men back to Japan. As the ship entered Edo Bay, shore batteries opened fire. Japan would remain closed to foreigners. Resentful that he was not permitted to be reunited with his family, Otokichi returned to Macau, working as a crewman on American, Dutch, and Chinese vessels. He aided Japanese castaways who also wished to be repatriated. He also helped missionaries and trade councils become fluent in Japanese. The West was preparing for the inevitable. In 1854, he served the British as a translator in negotiating a Japanese-Anglo friendship treaty. A poor 15-year-old boy living on the island of Shikoku was the sole support of his family. Being a peasant by custom, he was known by only one name, Manjiro. Samurais and noblemen were allowed to have two names. To earn money, Manjiro accepted a job fishing for tuna. With 4 other fishermen, their small ship was supposed to stay within 5 miles of the coast. They were at sea for 3 days when a typhoon struck their ship. Torrid winds and strong currents carried their small craft far out to sea. Miraculously, they found shelter on a small, desolate island, Torishima, or Bird Island. Lost on the volcanic speck in the Philippine Sea, their fate seemed hopeless. Whaling off the coast of Japan, the American ship, the John Howland, captained by John Whitfield, was in need of fresh provisions. Captain Whitfield sighted Bird Island. Instead of finding fresh water or food, the landing party discovered the 5 stranded Japanese castaways. Because of the language barrier between the captain and the castaways, Captain Whitfield decided to keep the castaways safe on board his ship. The next port of call would be Honolulu, Hawaii. The youthful Manjiro became keenly interested in how a modern ship could navigate the vast Pacific Ocean. By the time the ship reached Hawaii, Captain Whitfield agreed to keep Manjiro aboard the ship for the return voyage to New England. The 4 other castaways would remain in Hawaii. On the long voyage home around the Horn, Manjiro became known to his shipmates as John Mung. Captain Whitfield enrolled Manjiro in the old Oxford schoolhouse. The one-room schoolhouse welcomed children of all ages. On Captain Whitfield's farm, Manjiro learned how to ride a horse. To Manjiro, this was extra special because in Japan, only the samurai were allowed to ride horses. Manjiro had taken a keen interest in navigation. How could a ship find its way in the vast oceans of the world? Knowing his charge's interest in navigation, Captain Whitfield had Manjiro transferred to the Bartlett School. Here he could study mathematics, navigation, and surveying. It was at the Bartlett School Manjiro was introduced to Nathaniel Bowditch's book on navigation. Manjiro was so fascinated with the book, he would later painstakingly translate the book into Japanese. May 16, 1846. Manjiro had never lost his desire to return to Japan. Manjiro boarded the whaler Franklin. The Franklin was heading to whaling waters off the coast of Japan. Just maybe, he could be reunited with his mother. Unfortunately, with the strict closed-door policy still in effect, the Franklin, while coming close to the Japanese coastline, was never able to land. On the return trip to New Bedford, the Franklin did port in Oahu, Hawaii. Manjiro located his former castaways. Sadly, one had passed away. The Franklin weighed anchor and continued her voyage around the Horn back to her home port of New Bedford. On the voyage, Manjiro had earned the respect of his crew and was rewarded with the rank of first mate. From his share from the sale of whale oil, Manjiro formulated a new plan to return to Japan. On November 5, 1849, Manjiro boarded the ship bound for the goldfields of California. His plan was to strike it rich, panning for gold, use the proceeds to book another passage back to Hawaii, and then hopefully back to Japan to be reunited with his mother. When he stepped ashore in San Francisco, Manjiro was in all probability the first Japanese citizen to reside in California. To reach the gold fields, Manjiro boarded a steamboat, heading up the Sacramento River to the gold fields. Working alone, panning for gold, Manjiro would earn $600 for his effort. With his new earnings, Manjiro returned to San Francisco where he booked passage to Hawaii on a steam-powered merchant ship. In Hawaii, he was reunited with his fellow castaways. He offered his friends an opportunity to return home. Of the three, one decided the risk was too great. He had married and decided to remain in Hawaii. The other two were anxious to return home. With the help of local missionaries, they secured passage on a merchant ship heading to China. Manjiro's daring plan was to place a small whaler on the merchant ship. When the ship passed near the Ryukyu Islands, they would offload the whaler and row to the largest island in the Ryukyus, Okinawa. Okinawa was not chosen at random. During this time period, the Ryukyu Islands were not under the complete control of the Japanese shoguns. Foreign ships were permitted to port. Manjiro might have felt that he could slip secretly ashore. He and his two companions could then board a Japanese vessel for the last leg home. When the ship arrived off the coast of Okinawa, the ocean was in a tempest. There was no turning back. Their small whaler was lowered into the ocean. The three men began the arduous task of rowing to shore. Three strangers coming ashore did not go unnoticed by the locals. Manjiro and his two shipmates were taken into custody and interrogated. The local shogun recognized that the three visitors possessed important intelligence about the outside world. The three men were placed on a ship and transferred to Nagasaki. In Nagasaki, they were again debriefed on how far advanced the technology in the West had become. The shoguns recognized that Japan must make radical changes in order to survive. Manjiro and his friends were finally released and permitted to return home. October 5, 1851, 10 years and 10 months had passed since they had been marooned on Bird Island. Manjiro was reunited with his mother. The shogun recognized that Manjiro was a valuable resource. He elevated Manjiro to the rank of samurai and placed him in direct service to the shogunate. In honor of his hometown, he now was to be called Manjiro Nakahama. Manjiro's visit home lasted only 3 days. He suddenly received orders to leave immediately for the city of Kochi. His first assignment was to teach English to samurais. By 1852, the British had control of Singapore and Hong Kong. Commodore Perry requested permission from President Fillmore that the United States needs to act quickly and secure ports of refuge in Japan. The President agreed. From his prior studies, Commodore Perry was well versed in the exploits of Otokichi and his rescue by the Hudson Bay Company. Upon Perry's arrival in Shanghai, Perry was surprised to learn Otokichi resided in Shanghai. Perry offered Otokichi a position as official translator for his diplomatic mission to Japan. Otokichi declined, but suggested the services of his close friend and benefactor, the Reverend Samuel Williams. When Perry's small armada of ships entered Edo Bay, the shoguns were not surprised by the American arrival. The Dutch on Dejima Island had tipped the Japanese off. In addition, Manjiro had given the shoguns insight into understanding the Americans. Were they friend or foe? Manjiro informed the shoguns that the Americans were upright and generous and were not evil. However, the Americans did practice strange habits, such as reading on the toilet or showing affection between the sexes in public. The most important message would be conveyed that the Americans possessed superior technology and could be trusted. As the black smoke belched from Perry's steam-driven ships, the Japanese could see for themselves how far they had fallen behind. The Japanese did not have a navy and were powerless to force Perry back out to sea. For his part, Commodore Perry had little understanding that the power of the Japanese government rested in a feudal power structure ruled by the shoguns. Perry presented a letter from the President of the United States, James Fillmore, to the Emperor of Japan. Great and good friends, I have directed Commodore Perry to assure your Imperial Majesty that I entertain the kindest feelings towards your Majesty's person and government, and that I have no other object in sending him to Japan but to propose to your Imperial Majesty that the United States and Japan should live in friendship and have commercial intercourse with each other. The Constitution and laws of the United States forbid all interference with the religious or political concerns of other nations. I have particularly charged Commodore Perry to abstain from every act which could possibly disturb the tranquility of your Imperial Majesty's dominions. Our territory of Oregon and the state of California lie directly opposite to the dominions of your Imperial Majesty. Our steamships can go from California to Japan in 18 days. Our great state of California produces about $60 million in gold every year, besides silver, quicksilver, precious stones, and many other valuable articles. Japan is also a rich and fertile country and produces many very valuable articles. Your Imperial Majesty's subjects are skilled in many parts of the arts. I am desirous that our two countries should trade with each other for the benefit both of Japan and the United States. President Fillmore demanded two major concessions from the Japanese government: protection for American ships and sailors in distress off the coast of Japan, and safe and open ports providing American ships opportunities to purchase coal, water, and provisions. With his letter delivered, Commodore Perry told the Japanese he would return to sea and would return in the near future to hear their answer. Commodore Perry returned to Edo Bay in force. His armada included 9 ships, 100 mounted guns, and a complement of 1,800 crew members and Marines. Perry's gunboat diplomacy left the shoguns little choice. The small village of Kanagawa was chosen for the historic moment. On March 31st, a treaty was signed. The Japanese agreed to all of President Fillmore's demands. As the translator for the shoguns, Manjiro was present for the signing. If foreign warships are entering your ports, you best have a modern navy. The shoguns purchased from the Dutch Japan's first steam-powered warship, the Kanagawa Maru. The ship carried 12 guns and used the latest screw-driven coal-fired steam technology of its period. Manjiro accompanied the Japanese delegation to Washington, D.C. for the formal signing of the Amity Treaty between the United States and Japan. On March 17, 1860, the Kanagawa Maru would anchor in San Francisco Harbor. After an absence of 10 years, Manjiro would set foot once again in California. On May 17, 1960, a monument commemorating the first Japanese naval vessel to visit San Francisco Harbor was placed near the Legion of Honor Museum in San Francisco. Today, Manjiro's birth city of Nagasaki has been incorporated into the city of Tosas Shimizu. There you will find a monument commemorating Manjiro's achievements. By age 13, Hikozo Himada had lost both his mother and father. His stepfather, a seaman, invited Hikozo on a sightseeing adventure to Edo aboard the Iriki Maru. By law, Japanese ships were designed only for traversing the coastal waters of Japan. There was not even the simplest compass aboard. If lost at sea, there was little chance the ship could find her way back to Japan. Such was the fate of the Irikimaru. 15 days they drifted in the vastness of the Pacific Ocean. 500 miles off the coast of Japan, the American merchant ship the Auckland spotted the Ikimaru. The disabled Japanese crew was safely transferred to the Auckland. The Auckland was returning from China. Her next port of call would be San Francisco. Once in San Francisco, the youthful Hikozo would be befriended by the U.S. Customs Collector Beverly Sanders. I took Heko under my protection and soon discovered that he was much superior in intelligence. Sanders was also a businessman who was invested in steamships. He saw an opportunity to increase trade with the Orient. Sanders enrolled Hikozo in school. He would spend the next 3 years in San Francisco. When Sanders returned to his home in Baltimore, Hikozo followed him east, where he continued his education under the guidance of the Catholic Church. It was here he was baptized as Joseph Heko. In 1858, California's United States Senator William Gwin hired Hikozo as his personal secretary. Senator Gwin was interested in expanding American trade in the Pacific, especially Japan. In September of 1862, Heko received an appointment as a translator for the American consulate in Kanagawa, Japan. American and English treaties created unexpected consequences. The open-door policy turned the once orderly feudal Edo period into chaos. Foreign customs and uncivil behavior at the ports created anti-foreign riots. Unrest spreads. Heko observed, Yokohama, Nagasaki, and the China ports all send their quota of bearded foreigners on the hunt for the American dollar. Revere the Emperor, overthrow the shogunate, became the rally cry. In 1868, civil war gripped the land. Tokugawa's dynasty ended and the Meiji Restoration began. Those who supported the Meiji Restoration did so in the hope of curtailing foreign influence in the internal affairs of Japan. The new imperial government, however, recognized that to curtail Western influence, Japan would need to create a modern army and navy, plus transform her feudal society into a modern industrial power. Not everyone looked favorably at the transformation. Some who had fought and supported the shoguns would become refugees, seeking a place in the world where they could preserve their old ways of life. Working to preserve our watershed for over 25 years, please see our website, www.drycreekconservancy.org. Other videos on the Sierra Nevada foothills can be found on our other websites, www.youtube.com/user/MichaelStark1 or www.youtube.com/user/RosevilleTV or on our website, drycreekconservancy.org.